let's have a talk about the incredible case of Jussie Smollett and what it tells us about a left-wing media that is so determined to push a narrative that they lose all sight of the truth. Now, on Friday morning local time, the actor, though, as we will see, not a very convincing one, was convicted in a Chicago courtroom of 5 out of 6 charges brought against him for faking a double-barreled racist and homophobic hate crime against himself back in January 2019. Smollett, then a star of the U.S. TV show Empire, claimed, now, stick with me here, it's a great story, that on a freezing cold night in Chicago, when it was minus 16 degrees in the dead of night, he decided at 2 a.m. to go out to Subway and buy sandwiches. And when he did so, he just happened to have been set upon by 2 racist, homophobic white guys in downtown Chicago wearing MAGA hats who told him this is MAGA country before putting a noose around his neck and splashing him with bleach. For real. Now, as storylines go, this was more convoluted and preposterous than the latest Marvel movie. And yet, the American, and actually the world media, ate this up with all the gusto of stoned uni students eating unheated Pop-Tarts straight out of the packet. CNN's social media pages ate the story up without an allegedly to be found. The New York Times, too, leaned in hard on the story. The American ABC also pushed the narrative hard, calling it, quote, a brutal attack. They even retailed the claims of the Smollett family that this supposed incident where, again, a couple of white, racist, homophobic fans of a show nobody watches were waiting out on the cold, cold streets of Chicago, pound for pound one of the most reliably Democrat cities in America, to deliver a beatdown to Jussie Smollett. As Joe Biden would say, come on, man! Oh, and speaking of Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe woke up from his slumber long enough to tweet his support for Smollett, saying at the time, "What happened today to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country. We must stand up and demand that we no longer give this hate safe harbor, that homophobia and racism have no place on our streets or in our hearts. We are with you, Jussie." End of tweet, as Biden would say. Kamala Harris, too, leapt on the story, saying, Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or the color of their skin. We must confront this hate. Well, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked about all this after the verdict and whether the administration had any regrets about how quickly both Biden and Harris backed in Smollett, whose claims, again, were utterly preposterous. Have a look.
I would say that we respect the jury's decision. Lying to the police, particularly about something as heinous as a hate crime, is shameful. Instances of that need to be investigated fully, and those found guilty need to be punished. And false accusations divert valuable police resources away from important investigations. They make it harder for real victims to come forward and be believed. You know, if you look back at the time, it's also true and important to note that accusations of hate crime should be taken seriously, and they need to be fully investigated. But that's where everybody was looking at it at the time. But certainly knowing what we know now, it's important to also note the danger of lying to police and lying about hate crimes and the fact that it diverts important resources.
Amazingly, the next question asked of Jen Psaki was not, what dressing would you like with that word salad? But anyway, now we know the truth. Because in what may be the first case in American history of an American scamming Nigerians, Smollett, it turns out, paid 2 Nigerian brothers, one of whom he had a sexual relationship with, to deliver the fake beatdown, which was in truth so light he made it back to his hotel with the sandwiches he'd gone out to pick up. But if the Biden White House didn't learn the lesson of this hoax, neither has the media. And that, I think, is a problem. The CNN website reported that Smollett was found guilty of some charges. Okay, 5 out of 6, but who's counting? Over on MSNBC, which is Pravda to CNN's Izvestia, they decided to run with the line that the guilty verdict will empower Trump supporters. Yes, that's right. Commentator Zach Stafford wrote that, quote, "What is so important for us to do in this moment, as we look to what's next, is to ensure work is done to stop the epidemic of hate facing folks who look like Smollett. Trump supporters are not being subjected to hate crimes for supporting Trump on any level, full stop. Amazingly, he also had the audacity to conclude that Trump is an expert in gaslighting America. And if we continue to allow the Smollett case, no matter where one stands on it, to detract attention from everyday people impacted by hate in this country, it would be the greatest gaslight moment of all, and a signal of more to come. My friends, that is an act of such gaslighting, that is to say, convincing people of an unreality for your own manipulative ends, that it has its own carbon footprint. The line is not that it was bad that Smollett lied, full stop. No, for the left, it is that the really bad thing here is that Trump and his supporters, and really anyone with half a brain who read the details of the case, turned out to be right. So, why is this important? Well, functioning democracies like the US and Australia need a media that people trust. Yet, look at these numbers from the Gallup poll. They found that 31% of independents and just 11% of Republicans now say that they trust the press in the US. I suspect you'd find similar numbers here, though thankfully there are fine outlets like this one to help bring the numbers up somewhat. Now, here to discuss the Jussie Smollett verdict and the ramifications of his fake hate attack is the Post-Millennial's editor-at-large, Andy Ngo. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
So, Andy, we've got to talk about this here because this is just an absolutely fascinating case, I think, to so many people here in Australia. And the question I have is, Jussie Smollett's crime was so bizarre and utterly unbelievable. Why do you think so many people fell for it? Did they just want it to be true?
Well, it's no surprise that the media establishment, the media class is always in line with what the Democratic Party's agenda and goal is. If you go back to the beginning of 2019 when Smollett's explosive allegations came out, at that time, Democrat politicians were pushing so-called anti-lynching legislation, which was just a publicity stunt because murder is already criminalized and illegal. And Smollett's history in particular, he has and had very close ties to the upper echelon of those in the Democratic Party. And all of them saw what his claims were, which blamed everything that the Democrats hated, Trump supporters, what they think Trump stands for. So it's convenient to latch on. I wasn't surprised that all these celebrities came out to weigh in because celebrities are by and large stupid. But I was disappointed to see politicians who now have come to be president and vice president respectively throw in their full support behind Smollett when from the very first that we knew of the case, it was already hard to believe.
You have a magnificent tweet, and I know Twitter is often a sewer, but there are little diamonds in there that outlines the truth behind a lot of these hoaxes. And you say that I'm surprised when people are surprised that Jussie Smollett would fabricate a hate crime. People who claim to be victims of the right or whites are rewarded by American society, often financially. Some will lie. The fact that people are compensating this culture of oppression, how long has this been the status quo?
Well, Americans are a good people. So when they hear that a person has been victimized through hate, there's an outpouring of support. And unfortunately, there are those, usually on the left, who will take advantage of that kindness from Americans to claim to be a victim. And before I did reporting on Antifa, I used to write about hate crime hoaxes a lot. And there's usually not a lot of national coverage on it because it's inconvenient to the talking points of the left. But as you can see, like Smollett, or on a smaller context at a university setting, as soon as you come out provide no evidence and make some outlandish claim, you get media attention, support from the administration, support from others. You can set up a GoFundMe, people donate money. There's so much to gain by being a victim that people go as far as to fabricate hate hoaxes.
But I mean, I'm glad you said before that Americans are fundamentally decent people, because I think they are, and I would have a lot of good reason to say that. But does this show the fact that this crime, this hoax crime, happened and so many other hoax crimes have occurred, Andy? Does this actually prove that America is not the racist society that some people on the left would have people believe, if people have to go out there and make up fake hate crimes because there's not enough real hate crimes for them to capitalize on?
Yes, if we believe the talking point from the establishment left that hate is so, it's banality in America and it's so common, if we were to hear some of these allegations, we would shrug our shoulders and think that's life, that's how life is like every day in America. But the fact is, it's not. And it strikes at the core for the average American when you hear something, so hateful happening. Because hate crimes are actually so rare, and we have the data, you can look at how often they happen by the population size. And unfortunately, whenever there is an incident that happens or alleged to happen, there's a lot of attention. Whenever it's then reported later on that it's unsubstantiated or even faked, there's usually not that media coverage.